I got the text from Mom on December 23rd. Christmas dinner canceled. Last minute changes, she said. We'll do it next year. I stared at my phone in my Phoenix apartment, disappointed but trying to be understanding. Life happens, right? Then Christmas Day arrived, and I spent it alone with leftover Chinese food and old movies. That evening, scrolling through social media, to distract myself from the silence, I saw them. Photo after photo of my entire family at an elaborate Christmas celebration at my parents' house in Austin. Mom, Dad, my sisters Caroline and Beth, my brother Tyler, all their spouses, all the kids. 19 people total. The caption on Mom's post read, "Best Christmas ever," with a row of heart emojis. My hands started shaking as I stared at the screen, zooming in on each smiling face. They hadn't canceled Christmas at all. They had deliberately excluded me. I sat frozen on my couch for what felt like hours, though the clock only moved forward by minutes. Each photo was another blow. There was the dining room table I'd eaten at since childhood, groaning under the weight of turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, the works. I could see my grandmother's special lace tablecloth, the one she'd brought from Ireland 70 years ago, the one Mom only used for the most important occasions. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, massive and perfectly decorated, presents piled underneath like a department store display. My 7-year-old niece Emma wore the unicorn pajamas I'd sent her 2 weeks earlier. I'd spent an hour picking those out, making sure they were the exact ones she'd mentioned on our video call. In one photo, Dad was carving the turkey, wearing the apron that said Grillmaster that I'd given him for Father's Day 3 years ago. In another, the kids were opening presents, wrapping paper scattered everywhere like confetti. Tyler's wife held their baby, who couldn't have been more than 6 months old. I didn't even know they'd had the baby yet. Nobody had called to tell me. In the background of several shots, I could see the chocolate pecan pie on the dessert table. That was my pie. Mom made it specifically because it was my favorite. She'd been making it for my birthday and Christmas since I was 8 years old, after I'd tried it at a friend's house, and declared it the best thing I'd ever tasted. I counted the people in each photo obsessively, like somehow the number would change if I looked hard enough. 19. 19 people had been invited to Christmas dinner while I sat alone in Arizona, believing the lie that it had been canceled. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I should call someone, demand an explanation. But which family member would even answer? I set the phone down and walked to my kitchen, poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink, walked back to the couch, picked up the phone again. Background details kept nagging at me as I spiraled. I'm 34 years old. Work as an accountant at a mid-sized firm here in Phoenix. Good job, decent salary, respectable life. I moved here 7 years ago after my divorce from my college sweetheart. The marriage had lasted 3 years, ended amicably enough, and Phoenix offered a fresh start and better career opportunities. But I'd always stayed close with my family. Austin was only a 14-hour drive, and I made it back 4 times a year without fail. Thanksgiving, Christmas, summer vacation, and usually one random weekend in spring. We talked on the phone regularly. At least, I thought we did. Last Christmas had been perfect. We'd all gone ice skating at the outdoor rink downtown Austin. The kids had fallen constantly, laughing every time, and Dad had surprised everyone by being remarkably steady on skates for a 62-year-old man. Mom had made hot chocolate when we got home, the real kind, with melted chocolate and heavy cream, not the powder from a packet. She'd hugged me tight that night and told me I was her rock. Those were her exact words. "You're my rock, Finn. I don't know what I'd do without you." 2 weeks ago, I'd called Dad specifically to confirm Christmas plans. I told him I had the entire week between Christmas and New Year's off from work. He'd sounded happy, said he was looking forward to seeing me, mentioned that Mom was already planning the menu. Everything had seemed completely normal. There had been no tension, no weird pauses, no hints that anything was wrong. And now this. The Texas sky outside my window was dark. By the time I finally worked up the courage to call Mom, 7 in the morning her time, December 26th. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep and something else. Surprise, maybe, or fear. "Finn? Honey, it's so early. Why wasn't I invited to Christmas?" The words came out flat, emotionless, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. A long pause. I could hear her breathing, Could picture her sitting up in bed, Dad probably stirring beside her. Finn, we need to talk about something. Can you call back in an hour? I need to wake up properly for this conversation. No. My voice came out harder than I'd intended. No, Mom, talk to me now. Another pause, even longer. Then a heavy sigh. Your sister Caroline and her husband Dan said they wouldn't come if you were there. The words didn't make sense at first. I had to repeat them in my head twice before they connected to meaning. What? Why would they say that? Oh, Finn. Mom's voice trembled. There's no easy way to say this. 3 months ago, at Caroline's daughter's birthday party, the one you missed because of that big project at work, something happened. Dan accused you of sending inappropriate messages to Caroline. We've been dealing with this ever since. My apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. What messages? Mom, I've never sent Caroline anything inappropriate in my entire life. We're siblings. That's insane. The text came from your phone number, honey. Dan showed them to all of us. They were flirty, suggestive. Caroline was really upset. She's been seeing a therapist about it. I stood up, started pacing my small living room. Mom, I don't know what Dan showed you, but I promise you, I never sent anything like that. This doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that to my own sister? I want to believe you, sweetheart. I really do. Mom's voice had that careful tone she used when she was trying not to upset someone. But I saw the messages myself with my own eyes. They had your phone number. They sounded like you, the way you type, the phrases you use. And there were voice messages too. Voice messages? I hadn't left Caroline a voice message in years. We mostly texted, and even that was usually just birthday wishes and holiday greetings. Mom, this is crazy. I would never, ever do something like that. Can I talk to Caroline? Let me explain to her that this is some kind of mistake, or maybe someone hacked my phone or something. She doesn't want to talk to you right now. She feels violated, Finn. Betrayed by her own brother. Mom's voice cracked. Dan suggested that maybe you have a drinking problem, that maybe you sent these things when you were drunk and don't remember. I don't have a drinking problem. I was nearly shouting now. I have maybe 2 beers a week. This is insane. Someone is lying to you, and I need you to believe me. Finn, honey, I'm just trying to understand all of this myself. Dan and Caroline have been part of our family for 5 years now. Why would they make something like this up? What would they gain? I don't know, but I didn't do this. Mom, please. I'm your son. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was firm. I think maybe you should consider apologizing to Caroline and getting some help. Maybe talking to a therapist about why you did this. And then, maybe next Christmas, we can all work through this as a family. I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do. That's exactly the kind of defensive behavior Rachel warned us about. Who's Rachel? What are you talking about? But she'd already hung up. I stood in the middle of my living room, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. The Christmas lights on the building across the street blinked red and green through my window. Somewhere in the distance, someone was playing music, probably leftovers from a holiday party. My entire world had just tilted on its axis, and I couldn't figure out which way was up anymore. December 26th afternoon blurred into evening as I called every member of my family I could think of. Caroline's phone went straight to voicemail. Beth didn't answer. Dad didn't answer. Twiller didn't answer. I left messages for each of them, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable, explaining that there had been some terrible misunderstanding, that I needed to talk to them, that I loved them. By 8 o'clock that night, nobody had called me back. Then, around 9, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Finn, I don't know what to think. The evidence is pretty damning, but I'll talk to you. Video call in 10 minutes? Those 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. I paced my apartment, tried to organize my thoughts, figure out what I was going to say. How do you defend yourself against accusations of something you didn't do when you don't even know what evidence exists? When Tyler's face appeared on my screen, he looked uncomfortable, his jaw tight, eyes not quite meeting mine. Show me, I said immediately. Show me what you think I sent. Tyler's face disappeared from view as he switched to his camera roll. Then my screen filled with screenshots. Text messages, supposedly from me to Caroline. My name at the top, my phone number. The messages made my stomach turn. You look beautiful today. Can't stop thinking about you. And Dan doesn't appreciate you like he should. And worse things. More explicit things that I couldn't bring myself to read fully. Tyler, I never sent these. I swear to God, I never sent anything like this. His face reappeared, skeptical. They have your number, Finn. Your exact number. Look at the interface, I said, leaning closer to my screen. Look at the font. Does that look exactly like iPhone messages to you? The spacing is wrong. The color is slightly off. Tyler squinted at his phone, then looked back at me. I don't know, man. It looks pretty real to me. There are apps that can fake text messages, websites. You can make it look like anyone sent anything. Tyler, you've known me your whole life. Do you really think I'm capable of this? He was quiet for a long moment. I want to believe you, but Dan also has voice messages. What voice messages? Tyler tapped his screen again. A moment later, I heard my own voice coming through the phone, saying things to Caroline that made my skin crawl, complimenting her body, suggesting we meet without Dan knowing. It sounded like me, but something was wrong. The rhythm was off. The pauses weren't where I would naturally pause. That's AI, I said, my mind racing. That's voice cloning. Tyler, someone recorded my voice from somewhere, probably from videos on my social media or family videos, and they used AI to generate fake audio. This technology exists. It's all over the news. Tyler's expression shifted slightly, doubt creeping in. That sounds like a convenient excuse. It's not an excuse. It's the truth. Tyler, why would I do this? What possible reason would I have to harass my own sister? I don't know, Finn. People do weird things. Maybe you have feelings you haven't dealt with. Maybe the divorce messed you up more than we knew. The accusations stung worse than I expected. Who showed you these messages first? Who brought all this to the family? Dan. He called a family meeting about 6 weeks ago. You weren't invited, obviously. He showed everyone the screenshots and played the voice messages. He said he'd been monitoring Caroline's phone because he suspected something was going on, that she'd been acting weird and distant. A cold feeling settled in my chest. Dan presented all of this? Not Caroline? Caroline was there, but she was pretty much crying the whole time. Dan did all the talking. He was really upset, really protective of her. Said he wanted to go to the police, but Caroline begged him not to, because you're family. Tyler, listen to me. I think Dan is setting me up. I don't know why yet, but think about it. He's the one with all the evidence. He's the one controlling the narrative. Tyler shook his head. Why would Dan do that? He has no reason to hurt you. He barely knows you. That's what I need to figure out. But Tyler, I'm telling you the truth. I never sent those messages. I never left those voicemails. Finn, there's more. Tyler looked even more uncomfortable now. Dan has security camera footage from his house. It shows your car parked outside their place late at night, 3 different times in October. My blood went cold. That's impossible. I haven't been to Austin since August. I was here in Phoenix all of October. He showed us still frames. It's definitely a silver Honda Accord. License plate matches yours exactly. Tyler, I can prove I was in Phoenix. I have office security logs. I have credit card statements showing purchases here. Someone is using my identity. Tyler's face changed then, a flicker of real concern crossing his features. Finn, if you weren't in Austin, then someone has access to a car that looks exactly like yours with your exact license plate. That's not just faking text messages. That's serious. I know. This is bigger than some fake screenshots. Someone is systematically impersonating me. We talked for another 20 minutes. Tyler promised to look into it more, to ask careful questions, to try to get more information from Dan without arousing suspicion. But before we hung up, he said something that made my blood run cold. Finn, there's one more thing. Dan suggested to Mom and Dad that you might be dangerous. He's been talking about helping Caroline get a restraining order against you. After Tyler disconnected, I sat in the dark of my apartment, trying to process everything. Someone had gone to elaborate lengths to make my family believe I was a predator. They'd faked text messages, cloned my voice, somehow replicated my car or my license plate. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated, methodical campaign to destroy my relationship with my family. And it was working. I barely slept that night. By 6 in the morning on December 27th, I was on the phone with my car insurance company, asking about the claim that had appeared on my account. The agent, a woman named Patricia, with a thick Texas accent, pulled up my file. "Yes, sir, we have a claim filed on December 19th for an incident that occurred on October 15th in Austin, Texas. Your vehicle was reported as being involved in a hit and run. You allegedly struck a parked vehicle belonging to a neighbor of yours." "I don't have any neighbors in Austin. I live in Phoenix." "And I was in Phoenix on October 15th. Patricia's tone shifted, becoming more formal. "Sir, the claim was filed online using your policy number and personal information. The police report number is listed here as well." I wrote down the report number and called the Austin Police Department as soon as their offices opened at 8. The officer I spoke with searched their database twice. No such report existed. The police report number was fake. "Sounds like insurance fraud, sir. You'll want to file a report with us and with your insurance company. Someone's using your identity." My hands were shaking as I hung up and immediately called my bank. "I need to review all my recent transactions, everything from the past 3 months." The bank representative walked me through my statements while I pulled them up on my computer. There, scattered among my legitimate purchases, were charges I didn't recognize. Small amounts, easy to miss. A coffee shop in Austin, a gas station in Austin, a hardware store in Austin, $7 here, $15 there. All on dates when I could prove I was in Phoenix. "Someone's cloned my credit card," I said, my voice hollow. "I'm going to freeze all your accounts immediately, sir. You'll need to come into a branch to file formal identity theft reports. We'll issue you new cards with new numbers." After I hung up, I called the credit bureaus. That's when I discovered the credit card applications. 3 different companies, all denied because the inquiries had triggered fraud alerts. But the damage to my credit score had already been done. Someone had tried to open credit cards in my name using my social security number, my mother's maiden name, my full financial history. Only someone close to me would have that information. I thought about Dan. He'd married Caroline 5 years ago. He'd been to every family gathering, every holiday, every birthday party. He'd been in my parents' house countless times. Could have easily accessed family documents, old tax returns, anything with my personal information on it. But why? What did Dan gain from destroying me? My phone rang. Dad's number. I answered immediately. "Dad, listen. Someone is stealing my identity. I have proof. There are fraudulent charges on my credit cards, fake insurance claims, fake police reports. Someone is setting me up." My father's voice was cold, harder than I'd ever heard it. "Or you're in some kind of trouble and this is your way of deflecting. Dan warned us you'd come up with elaborate excuses." The words hit like a physical blow. "Dad, I'm your son. Don't you think you should at least consider that I'm telling the truth? You're my son, and I love you. But Dan has been part of this family for 5 years. He's given us grandchildren. He has no reason to lie. You, on the other hand, have been distant since your divorce. Maybe Phoenix changed you. Maybe we don't know you as well as we thought we did. Dad, please. Caroline wants a restraining order. We're supporting her decision. Don't contact anyone in the family until you're ready to tell the truth and get professional help." He hung up. I sat there holding my phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. My own father thought I was either a predator or mentally unstable. My family had closed ranks against me, and the walls were closing in. I pulled out my laptop and searched for private investigators in Phoenix. I needed professional help. Someone who could dig into Dan's background. Someone who could find proof of what he was doing. I found a highly rated investigator named Sharon Reeves, called her office, and explained my situation. Her fee was $3,000 up front. I didn't hesitate. I gave her my credit card information and sent her every piece of evidence I had. "If someone has this level of access to your personal information and is this committed to framing you, it's usually someone close," Sharon said, her voice professional and reassuring. "This Dan character is the obvious suspect. Give me 48 hours. Those 48 hours crawled by like 48 weeks. I went to work, but I couldn't focus. My boss noticed and asked if everything was okay. I told him I was dealing with some family issues. He looked concerned, but didn't push. I was grateful for that small mercy. Sharon called me on December 29th at 3 in the afternoon. Finn, I found something. Can you come to my office? I left work early, drove across town to her office in a strip mall near downtown. Sharon was a woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She had printouts spread across her desk. Dan's real name is Daniel Bradford. He legally changed it 7 years ago from Danny Bradshaw. She showed me the court documents. There it was, black and white. Danny Bradshaw had become Daniel Bradford in 2018. Why would he change his name, I asked. That's what I wanted to know. Sharon pulled out another file. Danny Bradshaw was involved in a financial fraud scheme in Dallas 10 years ago. He and a business partner ran a fake investment company, bilked investors out of about $500,000. The business partner, Jerome Matthews, went to prison. Danny testified against him, got immunity, but his reputation was destroyed. He changed his name and moved to Austin for a fresh start. Sharon slid a photo across the desk. Jerome Matthews, the business partner who'd gone to prison. I stared at it, my heart pounding. Jerome Matthews looked almost exactly like me. Same height and build according to his arrest record. Same dark hair. Same general facial structure. We could have been brothers. I think Dan has been projecting his criminal past onto you, Sharon said. He married into your family, got close, and now he's systematically replacing you with a narrative where you're the criminal. It's classic psychological projection and manipulation. But why me specifically? Why go through all this trouble? Sharon leaned back in her chair. That's the question I'm still working on. There's usually a financial motive with this level of effort. Does your family have money? Any inheritance? Or trust funds? I thought about my grandfather's trust fund, but that was small, split among multiple grandchildren. It couldn't be about that. Could it? That evening, I received an email from an unknown address. No name, no identifying information. The subject line read, "Stop digging." The message was short. You should have stayed away from the family. Now things are going to get worse for you. Back off, or everyone will know what you really are. I forwarded it immediately to Sharon and filed a police report. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic but not optimistic. Email threats are hard to track if they're using encryption and proxy servers. But we'll document it for your records. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in my apartment building made me jump. I kept checking the locks on my doors and windows. For the first time, I felt genuinely afraid. Dan wasn't just trying to ruin my reputation. He was escalating. And I had no idea how far he was willing to go. December 30th started with pounding on my apartment door at 6:30 in the morning. I jerked awake, heart racing, stumbled to the door in my pajamas. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers. My mouth went dry. I opened the door, trying to look calm, even though my hands were shaking. "Finn Harper?" the taller officer asked. "Yes, that's me." "Sir, we need to talk to you about a warrant issued for your arrest in Texas. May we come in?" I stepped aside, let them into my small living room. They stood near the door, hands resting casually near their belts, assessing me. "What warrant?" "I haven't done anything." The shorter officer pulled out a folded paper from his jacket. "Your sister Caroline filed a restraining order against you in Austin. Yesterday, you allegedly violated that order by sending her threatening emails. The Texas authorities have issued a warrant. I didn't send any emails. I haven't contacted Caroline at all. That's not what the evidence shows, sir." The taller officer held up his phone, showed me printouts of emails. My email address at the top. Messages to Caroline saying things like, "You can't keep me away from the family, and you'll regret turning everyone against me, and I know where you live." My stomach lurched. My email was hacked. I didn't send those. I can show you my phone, my computer. You can check my sent folder. Those emails won't be there. The officers exchanged a glance. The taller one said, "Sir, we're going to need you to come down to the station and sort this out with Texas authorities." Am I under arrest? Not yet. But you need to cooperate with the investigation. I spent 4 hours at the Phoenix Police Department, showing them my devices, walking them through my email security settings, explaining about the identity theft and the fraud and the fake text messages. I gave them Sharon's contact information. Eventually, They let me go with a warning that I needed to get this sorted out immediately, or Texas would extradite me for violating the restraining order. When I finally got back to my apartment, Sharon was calling. Finn, I've been tracking Dan's online activity through some legally gray methods. Don't ask how. But I found something disturbing. Dan has been using dark web services to purchase detailed personal information about you and to hire people to create fake evidence. I found chat logs where he discusses removing the competition. Competition for what? I'm still digging. But Finn, this man sees you as a direct threat to something he wants, and he's willing to commit serious crimes to remove you from the picture. Can we use the chat logs as evidence? Sharon's pause told me everything. They're obtained through methods that wouldn't be admissible in court, but they confirm what we suspect. Dan is orchestrating all of this. After Sharon hung up, I did something I should have done earlier. I called the family lawyer, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, who'd handled my grandparents' estate. She was semi-retired, but still did work for the family occasionally. Finn, honey, I heard about the troubles. I'm so sorry. Mrs. Patterson, can you tell me about grandfather's trust fund? The one that's supposed to be distributed next year? Of course. Your grandfather left $250,000 to be split equally among his grandchildren when the youngest turned 25. That's next year. You, Caroline, Tyler, and Beth will each receive $62,500, unless something changes. What could change it? There's a clause in the trust. A beneficiary can be removed if they're convicted of a crime or deemed morally unfit by a majority vote of the family. Your grandfather put that in there because he was worried about drugs or gambling problems. It was his way of protecting the money. Everything clicked into place. Dan wasn't just destroying my relationship with my family for revenge or control. He was doing it for money. If I was removed from the trust, my share would be redistributed to the remaining beneficiaries. Caroline's children were minors, so Dan would control their money as their father and trustee. He'd have access to $62,500 immediately. Mrs. Patterson, if someone was deemed morally unfit, who would get their share? It would be split among the remaining beneficiaries. So, if you were removed, Caroline, Tyler, and Beth would each get about $21,000 more. But Caroline's children are beneficiaries too, technically, through her. So really, a significant portion would go to Caroline's family. And Dan would control that money. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a moment. Finn, are you suggesting Dan is behind these accusations? I'm not suggesting it. I'm saying it. He's been systematically framing me to get me removed from the trust. That's a very serious accusation. Do you have proof? I'm working on it. Later that evening, my phone rang with a call from Beth. My sister Beth, who'd been silent through all of this. I answered immediately. Finn. Her voice was shaking, barely above a whisper. Finn, I need to tell you something. I'm scared. Beth, what's wrong? I never believed Dan's accusations. I've been investigating on my own. 2 weeks ago, I confronted Dan privately. I told him I thought he was lying about you. What did he say? He smiled at me, Finn, this cold, awful smile, and he said, if you say anything to anyone, I'll do to you what I'm doing to Finn. I have access to everything. Your finances, your emails, your secrets. Want to test me? My grip tightened on the phone. Beth, you need to stay away from him. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Last night, I went to Caroline's house while Dan was in the shower. I broke into his home office and took pictures of everything I could find. Her voice caught. Finn. He has a folder labeled Finn Project. It's full of notes about your life, your routines, your weaknesses. There are printouts of your social media posts, your work schedule, even photos of your apartment building here in Phoenix. He's been stalking you for months, maybe years. Send me the photos. Right now. My phone buzzed with incoming messages. Photo after photo of Dan's notes. Detailed plans for destroying my reputation. Timelines. Contact information for services on the dark web. Receipts for payments. It was all there. Documented proof of his conspiracy. Beth, this is exactly what I need. This proves everything. Finn, there's a problem. Dan has security cameras in his house. If he checks the footage, he'll know I was in his office. He'll see me taking pictures. An hour later, Beth called back, her voice panicked. He knows. He confronted me. He told Mom and Dad that I'm conspiring with you against Caroline. He's trying to isolate me too now. They're not listening to me, Finn. They think you've manipulated me." The family was fracturing, and Dan was the one holding the hammer. He'd successfully turned my parents against both of their children now, and he was just getting started. I booked a flight to Austin for January 2nd. Sharon warned me it was exactly what Dan wanted, getting me into Texas where the warrant was active. But I couldn't stay in Phoenix anymore. My family was in danger from a sociopath, and I was the only one who could see it clearly. Beth picked me up from the airport that evening. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her normally perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. We drove to her house on the outskirts of Austin, a small ranch-style place she'd bought 2 years ago. Inside, spread across her dining room table, was more evidence. "I went back," she said. "After Dan confronted me, I figured I had nothing to lose. I found his burner phone. He has 17 fake social media accounts, Finn. He's been impersonating you, sending inappropriate messages to random women all over the internet. He's building a pattern of predatory behavior that doesn't exist." I stared at the photos of the phone screen, account after account, all with variations of my name, all using photos of me pulled from my social media. Messages to women I'd never met, saying things I'd never say. "This is enough," I said. "This is proof we can take to the police." "There's more." I called Tyler. "He's coming over." Tyler arrived 20 minutes later, looking skeptical but willing to listen. When we showed him everything, when he saw the full scope of Dan's operation, his face went pale. "I brought Dan into this family," he said quietly. "I introduced him to Caroline at my office Christmas party 7 years ago. This is my fault." "It's not your fault," I said. "Dan is a predator. He would have found a way into the family regardless." Tyler told us something then that made the pieces fall into place even more clearly. Dan once mentioned he had a brother who was a criminal. He said his brother ruined his family's reputation, and that's why he changed his name. I just realized he was probably talking about himself, projecting his own criminal history onto someone else. Just like he's doing to you. We formulated a plan. Tyler would go to Caroline and Dan's house, pretend to be on Dan's side, try to get him to confess on recording. It was risky. If Dan suspected anything, he could get violent. But we were running out of options, and running out of time. Tyler left at 8 that night. Beth and I sat in her car down the street from Caroline's house, waiting. Tyler's phone connected to Beth's through a call so we could hear what was happening. Tyler had a small recording device hidden in his jacket pocket. Texas was a one-party consent state for recording, so legally, we were in the clear. Through the phone, we heard Tyler knock, heard Dan answer the door. "Tyler, hey man, what are you doing here? I want to help you deal with the Finn situation. Permanently." A pause. Then Dan's voice, cautious. "Come in." We listened as Tyler walked inside, as they sat down somewhere, as Tyler carefully steered the conversation. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how Finn has always been the golden child, how Mom and Dad worship him. It must be hard, living in his shadow." Dan's voice changed, became more relaxed. "You have no idea. When Caroline and I first got married, she compared me to him constantly. Everything was Finn this, Finn that. Finn so smart, Finn so kind. Finn would never forget our anniversary. I got sick of it. So, you decided to do something about it." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm protecting Caroline, protecting this family from his toxic influence. By setting him up? By making sure people see who he really is. But the evidence is fake, isn't it, Dan? The text messages, the voicemails, all of it." Dan's voice sharpened. "What are you really asking me, Tyler?" "I'm asking if you fabricated evidence to frame Finn." Silence. Then the sound of movement. "Are you recording this conversation?" "No. Of course not." "Let me see your phone." More sounds of movement, then a scuffle. "What is this in your pocket? You're wearing a wire?" Tyler's voice, strained. "Dan, calm down. You're just like Finn, always trying to undermine me. I've worked too hard to build my place in this family." Then the sound of impact, someone hitting someone else. Tyler grunted in pain. In the car, Beth gasped, reached for her door handle. "Call 911, I said, already running toward the house. I heard more sounds of struggle through the phone still connected in my pocket. I reached the front door and didn't bother knocking, just tried the handle. Unlocked. I burst through into the living room and saw Dan on top of Tyler, hands around his throat. Tyler's face was turning red, his eyes wide. I tackled Dan off my brother, and we crashed into the coffee table. Glass shattered. Dan swung at me, connected with my jaw, and stars exploded in my vision. I swung back, hit him in the ribs. We rolled across the floor, knocking over a lamp, breaking more furniture. Caroline appeared at the top of the stairs, screaming. "What is happening? Finn, you have a restraining order. Get out! Your husband is trying to kill Tyler," I shouted back, dodging another punch from Dan. Tyler was on his feet now, gasping for air, his phone still recording everything. "Caroline, Dan attacked me. He's been framing Finn for months. I have proof. I recorded him admitting everything." Caroline stood frozen on the stairs, her face a mask of confusion and horror. Sirens approached, growing louder. Beth must have made it through to 911. Dan realized the game was over and tried to run for the back door, but Tyler grabbed him, pulled him down. The three of us held Dan until police burst through the front door, guns drawn, shouting for everyone to get on the ground. We all complied immediately, hands up, faces down on the carpet. Officers separated us, cuffed both me and Dan. I didn't resist, just kept saying, "Check Tyler's phone. He recorded everything. It's all there." At the police station, it took hours to sort out. Tyler's recording had uploaded to cloud storage automatically, so even though the physical device was broken in the fight, the audio file was intact. The detective assigned to the case was a woman named Rodriguez, who listened to the entire recording with a neutral expression, then reviewed all the evidence Sharon had compiled, the photos Beth had taken, the chat logs from the dark web. "Mr. Bradford," Detective Rodriguez said, looking at Dan, "you're under arrest for assault, identity theft, fraud, and harassment. You have the right to remain silent." I sat in the corner of the police station, my jaw throbbing where Dan had hit me, my knuckles split and bleeding, and felt absolutely nothing. No relief, no victory, just exhaustion and a strange emptiness. My brother was being treated by paramedics for strangulation injuries. My sister Caroline was sitting in another room somewhere, her life shattered, learning that her husband of 5 years was a sociopath who'd married her specifically to gain access to our family for money and control. They released me at 3 in the morning on January 3rd. No charges. Beth drove me to a hotel, since I didn't want to go to my parents' house yet. As I lay in the dark hotel room, ice pack on my jaw, I wondered if exposing Dan would be enough. If my family could ever forgive themselves for what they'd believed about me. If I could ever forgive them. January 5th, 10 in the morning. I sat in a corner booth at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. Tyler beside me with his throat still bruised purple and yellow. Beth across from us, looking like she hadn't slept since the confrontation. We were waiting for Mom and Dad. They walked in together, and I barely recognized them. Mom looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past 2 weeks. Her hair, always perfectly styled, hung limp around her face. Dad's shoulders were slumped, his eyes red-rimmed. When Mom saw me, she made a sound that was half gasp, half sob, and rushed toward the booth. "Finn. Oh God, Finn." She reached for me, and I let her hug me, even though my body stayed stiff and unresponsive. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Dad slid into the booth, but couldn't look at me. He stared at his hands on the table, jaw working like he was trying to find words that wouldn't come. The waitress brought coffee nobody had ordered. We sat in uncomfortable silence, until finally Dad spoke. "The police showed us everything. All the evidence. The fake accounts, the chat logs, the Finn Project folder." His voice broke. "I don't know how to live with what we did to you." "How's Caroline?" I asked. My voice flat. Mom wiped her eyes, devastated. "She's staying with her friend Jennifer. The kids keep asking when Daddy's coming home, and she doesn't know what to tell them. She can't face you yet, Finn. She's so ashamed," Beth said quietly. "Dan used her miscarriage against all of us. That's the most evil part. He knew about it, saw how vulnerable she was, and weaponized it." I'd learned about Caroline's miscarriage only 2 days ago, when Beth filled me in on everything I'd missed. 8 months ago, Caroline had lost a pregnancy at 14 weeks. It had been devastating for her, and Dan had swooped in as the supportive husband, helping her through therapy, being attentive, and caring. Except he'd also been feeding lies to the family about me during that time, saying that Mom had told me about the miscarriage, and I'd never bothered to call Caroline. It was another layer of his manipulation. I never knew about the miscarriage, I said, looking at Mom. Nobody told me. But you all believed I knew, and just didn't care enough to reach out. Mom's face crumpled. Dan was there when I supposedly called you. He told everyone he heard me tell you, and heard you say you were too busy to deal with family drama. We believed him because why would he lie about something so specific? Because he's a sociopath, Tyler said, his damaged voice rough. Because he's been planning this for years. This wasn't impulsive. He married into our family with a specific goal. I pulled out my phone and showed them the documentation from Mrs. Patterson about the trust fund. It was about money. If he could get me declared morally unfit, I'd be removed from grandfather's trust. My share would be redistributed. And, since Caroline's kids are beneficiaries, Dan would control a significant portion of it as their trustee. Dad finally looked at me, horror on his face. $62,000. He destroyed our family for $62,000. It wasn't just about the money, I said. Sharon thinks it was about control and dominance. Dan has a pathological need to be the most important person in any room. I was competition. I had to be eliminated. We talked for another hour. Each family member tried to apologize in their own way. Mom kept crying, kept reaching for my hand across the table. Dad kept saying he failed me, that he should have questioned the evidence, should have trusted his own son. Tyler was consumed with guilt over introducing Dan to Caroline in the first place. Beth kept apologizing for not being brave enough to speak up sooner. I listened to all of it and felt disconnected, like I was watching the scene from outside my own body. These were the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were supposed to believe in me no matter what. And they'd thrown me away based on fabricated evidence and the word of a man they'd known for only 5 years. Finally, I spoke. I appreciate the apologies. I do. But I need you all to understand something. I looked at each of them in turn. You saw some fake text messages, and you were willing to believe I'd sexually harass my own sister. You saw a few pieces of manufactured evidence, and you decided I was either a criminal or mentally ill. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. You chose to believe the worst about me, and that choice tells me you never really knew me at all. The silence that followed was thick and painful. Mom opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. I don't know if I can forgive this. Not right now. Maybe not ever. You didn't just exclude me from Christmas. You were willing to watch me be destroyed. If I hadn't had the money to hire Sharon, if Beth hadn't been brave enough to gather evidence, I'd be facing criminal charges right now. My career would be over. My life would be over. And you all would have believed I deserved it. Dad's voice was barely audible. How do we make this right? I don't know if you can. My phone rang then, interrupting the heavy moment. Sharon's number. I excused myself and stepped outside to answer. Finn, I found something else going through Dan's seized computer files. He had been in contact with a man in Phoenix, someone he'd hired to stage an incident involving you. The plan was to make it look like you'd assaulted someone, with paid witnesses and fake video evidence. The incident was scheduled for January 8th, 3 days away. If I hadn't exposed Dan when I did, I would have walked directly into another trap. There's more, Sharon continued. I've tracked Dan's spending. He put nearly $20,000 into this operation over the past year. Multiple dark web services, the guy in Phoenix, equipment for faking evidence, even a car rental that matched yours for the security camera footage. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated, calculated, and incredibly well-funded. Where did he get $20,000? Credit cards in Caroline's name that she didn't know about. He's been stealing from her too. When I went back inside, Caroline was there. She must have arrived while I was on the phone. She sat at the far end of the booth, as far from everyone as possible, her face blotchy from crying. When I sat down, she finally looked at me. I helped him, she whispered. I gave him all your personal information over the years. When we'd fight, I'd compare him to you. I'd say things like, Finn would never forget my birthday, or Finn always knows what to say to make me feel better. I created this. I made him hate you. Caroline, he was already a criminal before he met you. You didn't make him this way. But I gave him a reason to target you specifically. And then when he showed me those fake messages, I believed them immediately because I was angry at you. Why were you angry at me? She wiped her nose with a tissue. Because you got out. You left after your divorce and built a whole new life. You seemed happy in Phoenix. And I was stuck here, in a marriage that was slowly suffocating me, and I resented that you escaped when I couldn't. It was the most honest thing anyone in my family had said to me in years. We sat together for another hour, and slowly, painfully, the truth of the past 2 years emerged. Dan had been poisoning the family against me gradually, planting seeds of doubt, telling small lies that built on each other. He'd isolated Caroline first, then used her as a wedge to divide the rest of the family. He'd been patient, methodical, waiting for the perfect moment to spring his trap. What happens now? Mom asked finally. Dan pleads guilty, or goes to trial. He's looking at 6 years in prison for the assault alone, plus additional time for the fraud and identity theft. The restraining order is now against him, not me. Caroline files for divorce, and we all figure out if this family can be put back together. Can it? Beth asked quietly. I didn't have an answer. 3 months passed like water flowing over stones, slowly reshaping everything. April in Phoenix brought temperatures in the 80s and clear blue skies. I was back in my normal routine, work and gym, and the occasional dinner with coworkers. But everything felt different now, like the world had shifted slightly off its axis and never quite settled back into place. Dan pleaded guilty to avoid trial. 6 years in prison for assault on Tyler, plus additional time for identity theft, fraud, and stalking. He'd serve at least 4 years before being eligible for parole. He was also ordered to pay me $68,000 in restitution, though Sharon said I shouldn't expect to actually see that money. Men like Dan never had legitimate assets to seize. Caroline's divorce was finalized in March. She got the house, full custody of the kids, everything. Dan signed the papers from county jail without contest. Maybe he knew he'd lost, or maybe he just didn't care anymore. Caroline had told me on one of our therapy calls that she thought Dan had already moved on mentally, was probably planning his next scheme, his next victim. Sociopaths didn't reform, they just found new targets. Caroline and I had been doing family therapy sessions twice a week via video call. She was in Austin with a local therapist. I was in Phoenix with mine, and we connected through a secure platform. The first session, we mostly just cried. The second session, we screamed at each other. By the 10th session, we were starting to have actual conversations. She'd written me a letter, 10 pages long, taking accountability for every moment she doubted me. Every time she'd chosen Dan's lies over the truth she should have known about her own brother. I'd read that letter 3 times, and each time it hurt less and helped more. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself, she'd said in our last session. I have to live with the fact that I almost destroyed you. You were a victim too, I'd told her, and I meant it. Dan was an expert manipulator. He targeted your vulnerabilities and exploited them. The kids, Emma and Sophie, asked about me now. Caroline showed them photos, told them stories about Uncle Finn from before everything went wrong. Emma had drawn me a picture of a superhero with my name on it. It sat on my desk at work, crooked and bright and innocent. Mom and I talked on the phone every day now. She'd send me a text every single morning at 7. Good morning, son. I love you. Always the same words, like a ritual of repentance. Some mornings I responded right away. Some mornings I let it sit for hours before replying. She never complained, never pushed. She'd told me she would spend the rest of her life trying to make up for what she'd done, even though we both knew some things couldn't be made up for. Dad called once a week, always on Sunday afternoons. We'd talk about sports, weather, work, anything except the incident. He couldn't bring himself to talk about it directly. His guilt was too raw, too consuming. Tyler had told me that Dad had been seeing a therapist too, trying to process how he could have failed his son so completely. I appreciated the effort, even if the conversations felt stilted and careful. Tyler and Beth had become my closest allies through all of this. Tyler still carried guilt about introducing Dan to Caroline, even though I'd told him 100 times it wasn't his fault. He'd flown out to Phoenix twice to visit me, and we'd spent weekends hiking in the desert, talking about everything and nothing. Beth had come once too, back in February, We'd gone to a baseball spring training game and eaten too many hot dogs and laughed for the first time in months. The trust fund had been distributed in March, as scheduled. I received my full share, $62,500. I donated $20,000 of it to the Identity Theft Resource Center and to a domestic violence organization that helped victims of psychological manipulation. The rest went into savings. Every time I looked at my bank balance, I thought about Dan trying to steal this money, about him destroying lives for such a relatively small amount. It made the money feel tainted somehow. Work had been a bright spot through everything. My boss, Marcus, had been incredibly supportive when he learned the full story. He'd actually promoted me in March, saying that how I'd handled an impossible situation showed the kind of character he wanted in his leadership team. The raise that came with the promotion meant I could finally afford a bigger apartment. I was moving next month to a place with 2 bedrooms and a balcony that overlooked the city. I'd started dating someone new in February. Her name was Jennifer, and she worked at the coffee shop I went to every morning. She'd asked me out after noticing I looked sad for weeks on end. On our 3rd date, I told her everything. I figured, if the truth scared her away, better to know early. She'd listened to the whole story, then said, "Wow, that's horrible. But it tells me you're resilient as hell, and I like that in a person." We'd been seeing each other 3 times a week since then. It was early, casual, but it felt good to have something in my life that wasn't connected to the family trauma. I'd been seeing a therapist too, a guy named Dr. Chen, who specialized in family trauma and betrayal. He'd helped me understand that my family's failure to believe me wasn't really about me at all. It was about their own fears, their own weaknesses, their own need to believe that their world was safe and controlled. Dan had exploited those weaknesses expertly. Dr. Chen helped me see that I could forgive my family without forgetting what happened, that I could rebuild relationships without pretending the betrayal hadn't cut deep. In early April, I received a package from Austin. Inside was a framed photograph of last year's Christmas gathering, the one I'd been excluded from. Someone had photoshopped me into the picture, standing next to Dad by the fireplace, smiling like I belonged there. It looked absurdly fake, my image clearly inserted, but the gesture behind it made my throat tight. There was a note from Mom in her careful handwriting. "Finn, you were missing from this photo, but never from our hearts. We're so sorry it took us so long to see what was right in front of us. Please come home for Christmas this year. We'll do everything differently. We love you. We're so proud of you, and we'll spend the rest of our lives earning back your trust. Love, Mom." I'd stared at that photo for a long time, at my badly photoshopped face among my family members. It was ridiculous, and touching, and painful all at once. 2 weeks later, I booked a flight to Austin for December 23rd. Not this year's Christmas, but next year's. I wasn't ready yet for this year, but I was willing to try eventually. That felt like progress. The lessons from this nightmare had carved themselves into my bones. Family was not immune to toxic behavior. Blood relation didn't guarantee goodness or loyalty. Trust had to be earned continuously, even with people you'd known your whole life. When someone showed you who they were through their actions, you had to believe them, not the story you wanted to believe. I learned that evil often wore a familiar face and used love as a weapon, that sociopaths could be charming, could integrate themselves into families and communities, could destroy lives without remorse. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive the unsurvivable, that rock bottom had a foundation you could build on. I learned that forgiveness wasn't the same as reconciliation. You could forgive someone and still maintain boundaries. You could understand why someone hurt you and still choose not to let them close again. Your worth was not determined by others' perceptions of you, not even your family's perceptions. Most importantly, I learned that the truth was like a seed. It might take time to germinate, might require patient watering and sunlight, but it was stronger than any lie. Lies required constant maintenance, constant energy to sustain. Truth just existed, waiting to be uncovered. December 23rd, 9 months after everything fell apart. I landed in Austin in the late afternoon, the Texas sky bright and clear. The entire family was waiting at the airport. Mom spotted me first and immediately started crying. Dad stood beside her with tears in his eyes. Caroline was there with Emma and Sophie. Beth and Tyler flanked them like sentries. Even a few aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in years had showed up. Emma, now 8 years old, broke free from Caroline's hand and ran toward me, her drawing of superhero Uncle Finn clutched in her hand. "You came! You really came!" I knelt down and hugged her. This little girl who'd been a baby when everything started, who'd grown up while her family was tearing itself apart and stitching back together. I promised I would. We drove to Mom and Dad's house in a convoy of cars. The house was decorated for Christmas, but everything was different from last year's photos. New ornaments on the tree, different color scheme, new traditions being intentionally created. Before dinner, Dad stood in the living room and asked everyone to gather around. "Last year," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we failed Finn in the worst way possible. We let a predator into our family, and we allowed him to convince us that our own son, our own brother, was the enemy. This year, we start over. Not by pretending the past didn't happen, but by acknowledging it and choosing to build something better from the wreckage. Finn, thank you for giving us another chance. Thank you for being stronger than we deserved." I raised my glass of sparkling cider, because I still didn't drink much. To second chances, and to the truth, no matter how painful it is to face. Everyone echoed the toast, and we drank. Dinner was awkward in places. Conversations would suddenly die when someone accidentally mentioned something from the past year. Caroline would start to cry randomly, then apologize and excuse herself. Tyler would look at me with such guilt that I'd have to look away. But there were good moments too. Emma and Sophie performed a play they'd written about a brave knight. Beth told a story about her new job that had everyone laughing. Dad and I washed dishes together in comfortable silence. After the kids went to bed, the adults sat around the living room with coffee and the chocolate pecan pie Mom had made. My pie. She'd made it even though she wasn't sure I'd come, made it as an act of faith. "This is hard," Beth said quietly. "Being together like this. Pretending everything's okay." "We're not pretending," I said. "We're acknowledging that everything's not okay and choosing to be together anyway." Mom looked at me with such raw emotion that I had to look away. "How did you get so wise?" "Trauma and a good therapist." That got a small laugh from everyone, breaking the tension slightly. We talked late into the night about everything. About Dan's trial and sentencing. About Caroline's therapy and her struggles as a single mom. About how the kids were adjusting. About the family members who still didn't fully understand what had happened, who thought maybe we'd all overreacted. About how trust had to be rebuilt slowly, brick by brick, and how some of those bricks might never fit quite right again. Around midnight, I found myself alone on the back porch with Carolyn. She was wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you if you hadn't. If you never spoke to any of us again, I considered it. For months, I considered just cutting all of you off and starting completely over. Why didn't you?" I thought about that for a long moment. Because Dan already took enough from me. I wasn't going to let him take my family too. Even if my family is broken and complicated and hurt me more than anyone else ever has. Caroline wiped her eyes. "My therapist says I'm going to spend years unpacking how I could have been so blind, how I could have chosen a monster over my own brother." "Your therapist is probably right. But Caroline, he was an expert. He knew exactly how to manipulate you, exactly which buttons to push. You weren't stupid, you were targeted." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the Austin suburbs. Finally, Caroline said, "Emma asks about you all the time. She wants to know if you'll come visit more often now. If you'll teach her to play chess like you promised before everything happened, I'll come back. Not as often as before, probably, but I'll come back. That's more than we deserve." Maybe it was, but it was also what I needed. Because I'd learned that healing wasn't about going back to how things were before. It was about building something new from what remained. And what remained was damaged and scarred and imperfect, but it was real. And real was better than the illusion of perfection I'd had before Dan tore everything down. The next morning, Christmas Eve, I helped Dad hang new stockings on the mantel. Mine had my name embroidered in gold thread, obviously new, obviously bought, specifically for my return. It hung between Tyler's and Beth's, a symbol of being woven back into the family fabric. "I know it's not the same," Dad said quietly as we worked. "I know we can't go back to before. No, we can't. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we build something different, something more honest. He put his hand on my shoulder, a tentative gesture that I didn't pull away from. I'm proud of you, son, for surviving this, for being strong enough to come back. Over the next few days, I watched my family try. Really try. To be better, to be more aware, to question their assumptions, to communicate more openly. It was clumsy and difficult, and there were moments of tension that cut deep. But they were trying, and that counted for something. On my last day before flying back to Phoenix, I stood in the driveway saying goodbye to everyone. Emma hugged my legs and made me promise to video call her once a week. Sophie, too shy to hug me, drew me another picture of a superhero. Caroline held me tight and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us." As the plane took off, I looked down at Austin growing smaller below me. That city held my childhood, my family, my trauma, my betrayal, and now, tentatively, my hope for healing. It was complicated and messy and painful, but it was mine. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, started typing. Not for anyone else, just for me. A reminder of what I'd learned, what I'd survived, what I knew now, that I wished I'd known a year ago. If you're going through something similar right now, if someone is trying to destroy you with lies, if your own family has turned against you based on fabricated evidence, I want you to know something. The truth takes time, but it's worth fighting for. Document everything. Keep records of where you were, what you did, every conversation, every interaction. Find your allies, even if it's just one person who believes you. Stay strong even when it feels impossible. Never let someone else's manipulation make you doubt your own reality. You know who you are. You know what you did and didn't do. Hold on to that knowledge like a lifeline when everyone else is telling you you're wrong. Get professional help. A good therapist, a private investigator if you can afford one, a lawyer who specializes in these cases. Don't try to fight this battle alone. And understand that even if you prove your innocence, even if the truth comes out, things won't go back to how they were. The people who doubted you will have to live with that guilt. Your relationships will be changed forever. But that doesn't mean they can't be rebuilt into something real and honest and maybe even stronger than before. The truth is stronger than lies. It takes longer to emerge sometimes. It requires patience and faith and enormous effort. But lies require constant energy to maintain. Truth just exists, waiting to be discovered. You can survive this. You can rebuild. And maybe, when you come out the other side, you'll be surprised by your own strength. I finished typing and looked out the window at the clouds below. Somewhere down there, people were fighting battles similar to mine. Somewhere, families were falling apart under the weight of lies and manipulation. Somewhere, someone was sitting alone on Christmas, wondering why the people they loved had turned against them. I hope they found their truth. I hope they found their Sharon, their Beth, their Tyler. I hope they were strong enough to endure until the lies collapsed under their own weight. And I hope that when they finally proved their innocence, they could find it in themselves to forgive the people who doubted them. Not because those people deserve forgiveness, but because holding on to that anger would only give the manipulator one more victory. Have you ever been in a situation where people believed lies about you? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more true stories like this one. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's fighting to prove their truth against a wall of lies. Your support means everything, and together, we can help people realize they're not alone in these battles. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brought you some peace, some understanding, or at least the knowledge that even the darkest situations can eventually find light. Take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, the truth always finds a way.